Activate your energy.
Welcome to the Activated Authors Podcast, a show where we distill the core principles of what it takes to become a happy, healthy, and productive author, no matter what stage of the journey you're at. I'm your host, Daniel Wilcox. I'm an international best-selling author, as well as an author coach, speaker, and creative entrepreneur. But most importantly, I'm a lifelong student of all things productivity, psychology, and human behavior. Thank you for joining me for today's episode. Without further ado, let's dive in. What is up, Activators? And welcome to another episode of the Activated Authors Podcast. Today, I am thrilled to be joined by the incredible Renee Gallant. Say hi, Renee.
Hola.
Renee Gallant spent the biggest part of her childhood growing up in North Texas, hiding behind bushes or sitting in trees, immersed in story of mystery and adventure and scratching out her own Trixie Belden fanfiction. But it was only after reaching middle age, having an empty nest and being bitten by a creepy little eight-legged foe that she thought to pick up pen and paper once more and lose herself in a fictional world where anything was possible. Unfortunately, no, she did not turn into Spiderman, nor even the Tick, but instead became an advocate for autoimmune sufferers, a grandmother, and finally a published author. After a 20-year hiatus where she was all things to all people, Renee Gallant switched her focus back to herself and her first love, words. Hi, Renee.
Hi, Dan.
How's it going? So just to front this, I think it's probably worth saying that you are a member of Activated Authors. But before that, you've been in my nano boot camps and all this kind of stuff. So we know each other fairly well, I'd like to think at this point. Though I'm sure that some stuff will come out that will amaze me during this chat.
Oh, I'm sure.
Yes, but I have loved watching your journey from as far as you've kind of like jumped into the group and seeing all the things that you're working on. But I want to start by kind of going off of what we mentioned there about Spiderman and the Tick. And obviously you didn't inherit those powers, but no. If you were a superhero, what would your superpower be?
What did I tell my husband the other day my superpower was? Maybe it was complaining. I was like, it's my superpower. I don't know what to tell you.
What do you utilize complaining as a superpower? I mean, obviously you can get like discounts and free food and stuff.
No, not that kind of, just whining in general.
The
procrastination, that's a good one too.
Yeah. Well, what power would you want?
What power would I want?
Yeah.
To read minds.
Oh, interesting.
Oh, yeah.
I feel like that's
to know what people really think.
I feel like that's a burden.
You think?
Well, I don't know. It depends. You'd have to, it's always specify the power, isn't it? Like, can you hear one person selectively or do you just hear everyone all the time?
Okay, I would want to hear one person selectively.
Yeah.
I would want to be able to zone in on that one person.
Jesus, that's terrifying. I know to avoid you at conferences now.
Yeah.
But tell the listeners all about your writing journey. Obviously, we covered kind of your general life journey, but where did your writing begin and how did you get to where you are now?
And it began in like elementary school. I did some fan fiction and I did some little short stories. And then through high school and stuff, I did some poetry. I was in a band and I wrote a lot of songs.
There's a new bit of information. Okay, go on.
Yeah. And then when I graduated high school, that was my plan. I was going to be a writer. And then I had children and then I had to feed children.
Mm-hmm.
So I had to make money. And back then, that was a long time ago. Self-publishing was not a thing. So I had got the book with a list of like agents and publishers and everything. And it was just overwhelming. And I was like, I can't do this. This is too much. And then jump ahead 20 years and here I am.
Jumping back to the mix. Yeah.
Yeah.
And you have 3 books out so far.
Mm-hmm.
3.5 if you include the short story collection that you're involved in. Let's jump back to sort of creativity and the early start of that, because you mentioned in your bio as well that you used to read a lot, hiding in bushes and sitting in trees. What was your first sort of love affair with fiction? Do you remember sort of the earliest book that inspired you, that made you think, oh, I'd love to do more with story?
It was probably the Trixie Belden mysteries. They were mystery stories. I was probably 10, 11. And me and a friend of mine would get like $1.50 from my dad on Saturday and ride our bikes up to the little store and get the next installment of this mystery series and devour it and then have to wait another week to go get another book. But I think that was the first. Now, the first book I remember reading was Dr. Seuss. One fish, two fish, red fish, blue fish.
Classic.
Something fish, old fish, something new fish.
It sticks. Most of it sticks.
Yeah.
What was it about the Trixie Belden books that you feel, especially in hindsight, grabbed you at that point?
It was, I guess, I wouldn't even say YA, maybe like Boxcar Children, except a little bit older than that, the characters. And it was mysteries, and it was adventure. And I like a good mystery.
Did you like to try and obviously work them out before you get to the end? Are you generally quite successful?
Sometimes. Sometimes. I love Encyclopedia Brown too. Those were always one of my favorites. Nice.
And then do you remember the first thing that you wrote?
The first thing I wrote was probably in the 4th grade. It was a homework paper that my teacher had given us an assignment, and it was a story, and we had to continue with the story. I don't know how many pages, I can't remember. And so the next day we had all turned it in, and she stood up in front of the class, and she's like, only one student did what I asked them to do. And then she read my paper in class, and everybody was like, you wrote that? You did that? And I was like, I thought that's what you were supposed to do. Like she said, continue the story. Because like I had conversations with people, and, you know, I don't know, I just did the thing. And then she told me that I would be a writer. And I was like, okay, that's it.
And how instrumental do you think her approval was for you in terms of belief and carrying that forward and thinking, you know, as the years have gone on, this is something I want to do?
Huge. I dedicated my first book to her, my first published book. Yeah.
Oh, I love that.
It was huge.
Yeah. Because I find that so many people, and this is a real bugbear of mine, that a lot of teachers don't understand the power of their words. And so many people, friends of mine, you know, authors that I've met in the space, were told at school, this is not for you, you're not going to do this, like you can't write, all that kind of stuff. And even as a throwaway comment, like how can you determine that for someone when they're sort of 13, 14, or even younger?
Yeah.
And then for you, the power to the opposite of you're going to be a writer, obviously that's created something in you that's kept you powering forward and kept writing with you, even after sort of taking a hiatus where you were raising children and returning back to that. So you wrote that first story, your teacher said you're going to be a writer. Where did you take it from there? Because you mentioned short story, well, you mentioned finishing stories, you mentioned poetry. At that point, was it sort of just experimental and playing with different things? What was it about sort of poetry as well that grabbed you?
Yeah, it was really experimental. The poetry started out as songs that I would just kind of alter a little bit to enter these poetry contests with. And what else did I do during that time? I had a spiral notebook that I was writing a book about. I loved Bon Jovi at the time. And it was like the story about Bon Jovi and this girl that like fell and hurt her knee, and they had to take her on the bus. And it was just like, I don't know, some long adventure thing. But I had a friend who would then pass it on to another friend who would pass it on to another friend. And so people would read it as we went, and then they'd give it back to me. And they're like, hurry up and write the next part. And so then I'd write the next part, and then it'd make the rounds around the school again. And I did that for a while.
Oh, that's a confidence booster.
I wish I still had it, but I don't.
Oh, do you not?
I do not.
Oh, that's such a shame. That's such a shame. So what lessons did you take from that? Was it, how did you improve your craft and work on the things that you wanted to write from that? What kind of feedback were you getting from people?
I think it made me want to make everything more suspenseful. Like I love suspense, I love reading suspense, and I wanted them to want more. So I tried to end it as suspensefully as I could. So that when it came back around to me, I could carry on and make it even more suspenseful.
And obviously it was gripping enough that was doing the round, and people were asking for those next sort of chapters. And I guess that must have helped form kind of the beginnings of what a writing habit could look like for you. Because what was the sort of turnaround in terms of how fast you were writing those pages and how you were getting them out to people?
Like, super fast. I probably wrote them in one night. It'd come back to me. I'd scribble them out in one sitting, maybe two, and then it'd go make the rounds again.
Oh, I love that. I love that. How old were you then?
15, 16.
Okay.
So.
And then jump forward a few years, and obviously we mentioned in the bio that you went on a hiatus. You went into motherhood, and you obviously had to look after children and provide and do all that kind of very, very important, very, very honorable work. How did creativity manifest itself in that period? Were you still creating in any way, or was that kind of a bit of a drier spell for you?
At the beginning, I was. I found some stories and stuff that I had started, some books I had started writing, but I didn't finish them. And I've always been a creative person: paint, draw, crochet, you name it. I've tried it. A little bit ADD in there, but but I couldn't finish anything. That was just a big thing for me. So as I got older and more mature, and my children were older and needed less one-on-one time with me, then I had to teach myself to finish what I started. That became a big thing for me.
Yes, and we'll definitely dive into that, because that's right in my wheelhouse. So obviously during that period, you were still doing little bits here and there. You weren't finishing anything.
Yeah.
I'm trying to work out how, because obviously lots of people will be living in that situation in which, it's a busy life, it's a busy household. Obviously you have to prioritize in order to look after children and make sure that, life stuff happens first. How did you feel around your creativity? And was that something that you were itching and burning to do, or kind of did you just get to the point where you accepted that was a step that I had to take a step back during that period?
At the very beginning of motherhood, I was still itching and burning. I would drive to a little community college. I'd drive like an hour, and then we moved and it was like an hour and a half, and I still did that. And I studied journalism for a very short period of time, and I wrote for the local paper for about a year. And so at the beginning, yes, I was still itching and burning. Then it got to the point where I had to do something to make more money and get out of the job that I was in. That was like a dead end job and was making me insane. I thought I was going to lose my mind. And I was pretty good at doing hair. I'd always done my sister's hair for all her dance recitals and stuff like that. And so I was like, okay, I'm going to do hair for prom this year. I'm going to just get a few people. And if it goes well, I'm going to beauty school. If I don't do good, if it sucks, then that's not for me. And I did well. It went great. I enrolled in beauty school, and God bless my father's heart. He came to me with this sheet of paper of all the occupations that made more money than doing hair.
Oh no.
Yeah, that you could finish in like 2 years, and it made so much more money than doing hair. And there was
this after or before?
I think it might have been before.
Okay.
But there was just enough rebellion left in me that I was like, I'm doing it.
Yeah.
And I've made a 22-year career of it.
It's not too shabby. I suppose within that as well, there is, I know you have to work within the confines of obviously what people ask for, but I suppose there is a creativity to that.
There is. There's a lot of creativity to it. And I think that's part of why I've stayed with it so long. Is it's something different every day. Not the same thing day in, day out.
Yeah.
And I think that has helped keep my interest.
And you went through a spate of not finishing things, which I've certainly remember being in that place a fair few years back, and it's frustrating as hell. How did you approach getting to the point where you did start finishing things? I know we've spoken sort of off camera about, as you say, this is sort of a real important part of you now, but to make that switch and to honor yourself enough to make that a part of your value system, how did you conquer that and get from I'm never finishing anything into right, I'm going to finish the things that I start?
I don't exactly know. I can't tell you, every step I took. I just know I got tired of feeling not really like a quitter, but I felt tired of not feeling like an adult. There you go. And I think it was after I proved that I was terrified before I bought my hair business. And it took so long to go through. I told my husband, I said, maybe God's trying to tell me I am not mature enough to do this. Like I can't, because I was terrified. Was not responsible enough to run this business. And I think that was part of it. Becoming responsible. And then I was just like, okay, you're a freaking adult. You're going to have to finish it.
Yeah.
It just has to be done.
And then what was the first thing you finished after that?
Probably crocheting a baby blanket.
Nice.
Yeah.
How long did that take?
Who knows? Probably a very long time.
Yeah. But it is such a big jump. And I'm 31 and I still feel like I know I am adult, but I'm still yet to feel adult. But responsibility really did shift for me when I became a dad. That really was the big instigator. Before that, it was like faffing around here. But I mean, I think even then for a few years when Bailey was a baby, there was still that element of the reality doesn't sink in and you don't hit that thing. And you begin to reach a point of understanding that you are what you do and you are what you finish.
Yeah.
And as you say, that is a powerful thing to switch. But like you say, it seems like such a big, I mean, it seems like I'm sure it 100% was like such a big undertaking to take on a business and run it yourself. Talk me through that decision, because obviously you could have worked for other people, I'm sure, and kind of running other salons and sort of been, I mean, I don't obviously know the industry, but the way that works in England, I know that people can kind of like rent out slots in different people's salons and stuff. What was the impetus behind that decision to own your own business and to start on that path?
So being a hairdresser is very difficult to get started and build your clientele, and especially in a small town that I live in. And I went to work for a salon who had a great reputation. They did a lot of continuing education. They were just very professional, which was what I wanted to be a part of. And I was there 4 years, I think. And the salon owner had a brain bleed. I asked her the other day, because she still comes into the shop. She was 49 years old. And she had a brain bleed, and she was out for nearly a year. Well, while she was out, I did her customers. So I just inherited this business. And then the doctor told her he really did not think she should go back to work. And so she talked to me and asked me if I wanted to buy this shop and the house next door, because they were side by side. And her house was a lot better than the house I was living in at the time. And so I talked to my dad, I talked to my husband, we discussed it, and I was like, okay, I'm going to do it. But then, like I said, it went from like April, it took from April to October to get this done. And the longer it took, the more scared I got. I'm like, okay, maybe this was not for me. God is like, you are not responsible. And I tried to back out at one point. And then she cried, and I was soft-hearted, and I was like, okay.
Yeah.
And I'm glad I did. But I just kind of inherited a set business, a set clientele.
What were some of those early lessons that you learned from, say, the first year of running that business? Is there anything that sticks out as sort of carried forward with you and giving you a way to guide yourself?
Just being more responsible. And I think working with her for 4 years really helped that, because she is a very regimented person. I am not. And so I tried to take some of my lessons from her. Did I hold on to all of those? No. Like, my taxes really stress me out because I put them off till the last minute. Where I should do it every month. But so, I kind of fell off a little bit.
And how about in terms of building a clientele and growing the business to where it's sustainable for you?
My daughter would die. She said, consistency, consistency, consistency. That is what I preach to all the girls who have ever worked for me, to the girls who work for me now. You cannot do anything if you're not consistent.
Mm-hmm.
You know, you can't build a business. You can't run a restaurant. If customers don't know when you're going to be open or when you're going to be there, they will eventually go somewhere else. And I took a little hiatus from doing hair for about 2 years. We had moved to a different town, but I would come home on the weekends, like 1 weekend a month on a Saturday, and just work from 10 in the morning until 10 at night, and just cram them all in one day. And then when we moved back, I still had the business and everything. And it was really hard to sit in the beauty shop and watch the other girl do the clients that you used to do.
Mm.
It was so difficult. And sometimes I'd just have to get up and go to the house. I couldn't stand it. But God bless the girl. I love her, still love her, but she's not a consistent person. And so the fourth time of somebody calling and saying, hey, is so-and-so there? And I'm like, nope. They're like, do you know when she's coming in? Hadn't heard from her today. I don't know. They're like, well, can you do it? So it took like 3 months for me to get all my clientele back. Like,
big lesson.
Because I'm always there. Always there.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And that's what it takes.
Yeah, I definitely think it's, you know, industry dependent, especially more in sort of the service industry. Like it's such a huge thing. And I say this to people a lot when it comes to you know, providing content for people to read regularly. So for example, with the Other Stories podcast, we were very clear from the start that it's every Monday. We don't miss a Monday, because if you miss a Monday, people will go to someone else who's delivering every single Monday. And that's what happened. And I think, you know, setting the expectation as well. So she was making these appointments and they're not turning up. I think it's different to saying I do this date and then this date and this date, and sort of being clear with people as you move forward. It's not disappointing the customers.
Exactly. If you only want to work 2 days a week, then tell your customers that that's what you're working so that they know.
Mm-hmm.
If you don't want to start your day till 11 o'clock, then tell them, but you better be there at 11 o'clock.
Mm-hmm.
And I say that and I lecture. Am I very consistent with my email newsletter? No, not really.
Well, this is kind of where I'd love to get to, because, you know, you learn these lessons from running a business. What lessons have you taken into running your author business? Because you've been published since 2020, writing sort of these novels since, I want to say 2017, was it 2018?
2018. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So obviously you've been sort of putting together the mechanisms of your author business behind you. You've got 3 books that are well reviewed and doing well. And so what lessons have you taken from running a business and passed into your author businesses, and what lessons haven't you?
I would say consistency and not consistency. At the very beginning, I was very consistent. I was very nose to the grindstone because I was determined to make it work. And then which 2020 has been hard on everybody. You know, everybody's had a hard time since then. But it's like so much has happened. You just kind of hit rock bottom. So I'm trying to dig myself out of the pit that I have been in. And I'm going to try to be more consistent like I was in the beginning, because I have kind of fallen off that wagon. And that's not a good thing. But with the help of some very smart people, I am like pushing my way up.
So what tricks have you learned to try and build your consistency back up? Because it is, as you say, it is easy to fall off the wagon and hard to climb back on. So is there anything that you've been doing particularly to try and be more consistent with your writing?
Being part of a writer's group does help, where we do sprints on certain days at certain times. And that has really helped a lot. And just every morning, I can't say try it because I'm just starting to get out of the pit. Try to write every morning. You know, I have between 5 in the morning to 7 in the morning to write. I try to do that. I was trying to write in the evenings. I don't really try to do that anymore. I try to spend time with my husband when he's home. And so really like 5 to 7 is just my peak time that I can write.
Yeah.
And I try to do that Monday through Friday. And then if he's gone on a Saturday, I will spend all day Saturday in my office doing stuff. Am I always writing? No. Sometimes I sit at my computer and I'm like, this is too hard. I can't do it. So I'll go paint something.
Yeah.
But yeah, just
Yeah.
trying to do it every day.
And it's a process. And I definitely, I want to dive more into the community stuff. And I'm always wary. This is the Activated Authors podcast. We're talking about the Activated Authors community, and it is the community that I run that you're a part of. So I don't want it to come across sort of self-serving, but at the same time, like I fully believe in what we're doing. I fully believe in like people like you in the community as well. And so, you know, there are advantages to that. And so when I ask the questions, I just want to preface that with like, none of this has been set up. I'm not leading you to say certain things. Like, by all means, if you want to bitch and moan about the community, that's fine. Do it on your own time. But you joined, so it was in 2020, at the end of 2020, you joined in the boot camp. And from then kind of went into my Wilcox Writers group and went into the Activated Authors group. And you've been sort of a core pillar within the community itself, constantly there pretty much every single session. What are the benefits you find from being in a writer's community?
Oh my gosh, there's so many. There's so many. It's like a supportive family that understand your frustrations. Because my mother, one time I was really stressed out trying to come up with a different ending to a book. I had split it in half and I had to come up with a different ending, different beginning. And I was really stressing on it. And my mom's like, it's not supposed to be stressful.
Oh,
it's supposed to be fun. And I'm like, you just don't know. But writers know that we love it. But yes, it is stressful. And so a group of writers, like, you all speak the same language and you feel a lot of the same things. And if you're having a really down day and you just feel like there's no way you can create anything, it's okay. And we're all there to lift you up and support you. And like, just take a rest day. It'll be okay. You can come back to it when you feel better. And it's just nice having that sounding board and ideas. And there's been some fantastic marketing information shared in the group lately. It's just really invaluable to have a group like that.
Yeah. I think the good thing as well with these kind of groups is, you know, as they get bigger, more information like that is going to be shared. And so it kind of becomes its own little engine, and it just rolls. But I think you hit on a very, very good point there, which is, I think something that I learned quite early on is like, no one understands writers apart from writers, or probably more broadly artists do, but I think everyone's got their own little niche, their own little problems. And I was quite lucky in that I found a group of writers within probably about 4 or 5 months of my writing journey, the Hawk and Cleaver guys, who I kind of did a lot of stuff with, and I was surrounded with those people. But you're right, like my parents don't understand what it is to be a writer. Like my brother, my sister don't, a lot of my close friends don't. And actually sort of over the years, my friendship group has drifted from the people who don't write to the people that do. And I think just because that's a core part of, you know, what it is that makes my life. And sometimes you just need people in the trenches to, like you say, know that it's okay to take a bit of stress off yourself, or, you know, maybe you can work a little bit harder and you're being a bit too soft on yourself. And it's just having those conversations and speaking to people. Because what I find very, very interesting is we've got a whole range of people in that group, from, you know, people in their early 20s who have never published to people sort of going into their 50s or 60s, and, you know, people from all different backgrounds, different genres. But the universal truths of what people have to do to write is the same.
It's the same. No matter what genre, what niche, how old you are, how young you are, it's the same.
Yeah. And what I found really interesting as well is earlier on you mentioned about the fact that you bought all the information that you needed when you were younger to get started on publishing. And obviously that would involve pitching out to agents and trying to get query letters and stuff. And then that was too much work for you. And now we've come full circle and you've chosen the independent publishing route.
Yeah, that's like, so when I accidentally outed myself on Facebook that I was writing again, that was completely accidental. A couple of my friends were like, well, are you going to self-publish or are you going to traditional publish? And I'm like, well, traditional. because I didn't even know that self-publishing was a thing.
Mm-hmm.
That was like in 2018, so it had been around for a while, but I had never heard of it. I didn't know it existed. And so I looked into it. I started looking into it more, and I was like, I am absolutely doing traditional because I can't learn this much.
It's a lot of shit.
This much shit. I didn't even know how to use track changes in Word. Like, I had lived in this hairdressing bubble for 20 years. And I spoke that language, but no other language.
Mm-hmm.
And so over the next year and a half that I wrote the book, that I wrote a few books and dug deeper into it, I was like, I am 100% indie publishing. I heard so many horror stories of getting so close to publishing, and then the publisher's like, nah, we're not going to do it. But we're still going to hold on to your book.
Yeah.
You can't, do something else with it. And I was like, yeah, I don't think so. I'm not going to work for like 5 years for a company to say they're going to publish it, not publish it, and then I still can't do anything with it. So, yeah. And I learned stuff. I'm still learning.
Oh, there's a lot to learn.
Not always. There's a lot to learn.
Yeah. I find that every time I write a book, I still have that thing in my head of like, oh, maybe I'll pitch this out. And then within sort of about 5 minutes, I'm like, no, not for me. And, there is something to be said for traditional still, but like I certainly am in your camp of just, I want the control of my book and to know that I can put it out and that it can get into the hands of the readers that want to see it. How did you approach learning all of that side of stuff? What were your sort of key resources to helping you understand what it was to independently publish?
A lot of podcasts. So Joanna Penn's podcast is invaluable. I think I went like back to the beginning.
Jeez.
And listen, and I would jump, look for certain subjects that I needed to, lots of articles, just digging into stuff. And I think I jumped into too much at the beginning, things that I didn't have to do that I thought I did. So I just did them. But also Mark Dawson's podcast.
Mm-hmm.
I listen to his a lot. So there were some things that I did that later I heard Joanna Penn say, you don't have to do that at the beginning. Like, just wait. And I'm like, oh, well, sorry, done.
Like what?
Sorry, out there.
Is there anything specific that you can think of?
I don't know. Not off the top of my head. I just remember thinking, well, crap, I wish I'd known that. I could have spent less time doing that and more time doing something else. But she has always really stressed going wide with your books. And then I can't remember. I think it might have been the Career Author Summit in 2020 that we had to do virtually, that I heard her speak, and I got, we got to ask questions and stuff. And as a new author, she said, and this floored me, she said, go in KDP for your first series, learn the ropes, learn how it works, and then you can pull it out.
Yeah.
I'm like, pull it out after a couple of books. She said, no, finish the series in KDP and then pull it out if you decide you want to go wide. She said, but just to learn the ropes and learn the basics. And that just floored the shit out of me.
Yeah.
Yeah. I never thought she'd say that. But
no, she's very much a constant proponent of wide. And your books at the minute, they're wide, correct? They are KU.
Yeah, they're KU.
And was that because of Joanna's advice? I like that. I mean, it makes sense because there is so much to learn when it comes around to writing your first book, editing it, doing the covers, all that stuff.
Advertising. That's one of the things that I did right off the bat that people were like, you don't really want to spend time and money advertising your first book. You want to have several books under your belt. I just jumped right in with the first book.
Yeah. So for people who are listening, who this might be your first ever writing podcast, or you might be unaware of that, the advice at the minute generally is to get at least 3 books out before you start actually pointing advertising revenue to it, because it just makes more sense. Because then once somebody's finished one book, they can jump to the next one, preferably in series. Not always, depends on who you are as a writer and what kind of approach you take. And what have you learned? How do you approach now? Because you've written 3 books in your series. You are working on book number 4, soon to start working on book number 5, because that's how numbers work. What have you learned from writing that first book that you carried through to the subsequent books?
I think in the first book, I put a lot of unneeded information in it. So I've learned how to like narrow that down, cut it out as I'm writing instead of after you've written the whole book.
Mm-hmm.
I had a lot of eyes on that first book. I did like a developmental edit, and I had several beta readers, and I got sample edits from probably 5 different editors. And so I could compare all of their notes and see. And a lot of it was just too much information and drawing attention to the wrong things. They're like, you have described this person in a lot of detail. He better be a big part of this book. And I was like, well, let me cut out 5 paragraphs of that. Let me narrow that down, because he's sort of integral part, but not that big. And I would like to say that I learned to plot, but I haven't. And I'm still kind of hodgepodge all over the place. But yeah.
Would you say you have a process at the minute, or is it, as you say, just go with the flow depending on each book?
Just go with the flow. And am I happy with it? No, I don't like it. I feel like it should be more streamlined. And by this point, I should be more streamlined, but I'm not.
And you're producing.
And I'm producing slowly, not as fast as I would like.
Yeah.
But yeah. But maybe that will get better, in the next year as I come out of the burnout thing. Because it was full burnout, like emotional, physical, mental work. Just like completely.
Yeah. And I mean, obviously it can be said for a lot of, well, not even just writers, but everyone, that 2020 and COVID and all that kind of stuff definitely burned the world out. And I know that I've spoken to a couple of therapists over the last few years for various reasons, and sort of coaches as well in terms of business, and every single one of those points back to the fact that the burnouts and the I guess sort of brain fog isn't uncommon among a lot of people, but I don't think a lot of people attribute it to the coronavirus because it's quote over, and obviously it's still technically not, but that's a whole different conversation. But coming out of that kind of burnout is tough. Is there anything that you did specifically to kind of help you get into a place where you started to roll back into the writing again? Was there anything specific that you did that you can attribute that to?
Meditation has helped. Meditate in the morning. It has helped focus me. I try to meditate right before I start writing. I do like a little guided thing for focus and clarity. I bought some teas that are like for focus and clarity.
Nice.
To try to get rid of the brain fog. And taking time for myself, being kind to. That is something I have learned from activated authors, because I have not ever really been very kind to myself. And for all of my life, I have just worked for other people and done for everybody. And that's a hard habit to break. And for me and those people surrounding me, they don't love it. But I have to. I could not keep doing all the things I was doing. So being kinder to myself and taking a break and trying not to feel guilty about it.
Which is hard.
Oh, guilt's my other superpower.
Yeah.
I am really good at feeling guilty about crap that I have no control over.
Yeah. I'm in the guilt club too. That's a conversation that repeatedly comes up with people. Just guilt over stupid things, like even if I go for a walk without the dog, I feel guilty that the dog's not there. And I'm like,
yep.
everything. But yeah, I think that is part of the journey that I have enjoyed watching with you, because as you say, you are essentially matriarch. You are, the central pillar that holds a lot of things together, family wise and business wise and everything else. So to also then hold a writing career alongside that is no small feat at all. And I can imagine it's a hard journey to go through, trying to set those boundaries and getting on that path. Is there any advice that you'd give to anyone who is perhaps in a situation of where you were a year or 2 years ago, someone who is that matriarch, really wants to drive to do something creative but doesn't feel like they have time or that they're not allowed? Is there anything you'd like to say to that person?
You are allowed. It might take you a little while to realize that you're allowed. And I would not have got to that point if it wasn't for activated authors. And you and Sam and Laura in particular, and Pan, are, have really, really helped me realize that it is okay to care about yourself. You don't have to be self-sacrificing all the time.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. You've got to find a community. You've got to find a group, whether it's meditation, whether it is listening to uplifting podcasts, whether it is counseling. You've got to find a way to break free of that guilt.
Mm-hmm.
So
find
that
your
you
people.
Find your people.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I think, because again, I was definitely down that sort of guilt train a couple of years back of doing lots of things to everybody else. That's something that I learned from my mum, who I've learned from her granddad. That's just like the way that our family is. And being that person who is, or holds himself responsible to all these different things, it feels selfish to put yourself first.
Yeah.
And I know this kind of analogy has been used a lot, but it's one that only sort of ingrained itself recently in me, is the whole when a plane's going down, you need to employ your oxygen mask first. Right? You have to be able to take care of yourself to then functionally and to your best ability then look after everyone else. And it's not a selfish thing at all. It is a necessary thing to live a happy, healthy life that you can then have other people benefit from that from.
Yeah. It's very hard to be patient with people and understand. I always thought that I was patient with them and understood their hurts and stuff, but then it got to where I felt like I didn't.
Mm-hmm.
And now that I'm like focusing a little more on myself, my mental health, that kind of thing, I'm getting back to the point where I can see their hurts and try to help them, but not to the point that it hurts me.
Yeah.
Yep.
100%. I want to touch on, if we may, just very, very quickly, your battle with Lyme disease. And I wondered if you can give the listeners a little overview on kind of how that came about, and then also how that affects your writing and how you sort of move forward with living with Lyme disease.
So I got bit by a tick on May 7th, 2015. It was a Thursday.
Roughly, yeah.
Yeah, roughly at 9 p.m.
Mm-hmm.
And I watched it, because I have an uncle that had Lyme disease. He had the bullseye rash, the whole thing, and he let it go so long. We thought he was dying, but he was a man and he didn't go to the doctor, He was just like, be fine. Several years later, we thought we were going to lose him. And we did eventually lose him. But so I watched it, didn't have a rash. I'm like, okay, I'm in the clear. And I was doing a lot of walking at the time, exercising. I lost weight. I was really trying to take care of myself. And I went from working all day, going to walk a mile and a half after work, to I couldn't stand up to blow dry my hair. I couldn't stand up in the shower. I would take a shower and I'd have to lay down. I would get dressed and I'd have to lay down. And I don't know how I made it through that time, except that my father instilled this horrible work ethic in me. And so I would cry before I went to work. I cried at lunch and I cried before I went back. And I cried at night. And it was very difficult. And I didn't get treatment for at least 3 years because nobody knew what it was. We didn't know what it was. And when I first went to the doctor, when I finally gave up, I got bit in May, went to the doctor in April, when I couldn't walk. Like my feet hurt so bad. And a nurse friend, she's like, you have plantar fasciitis. You need to go get some shots in your feet. Da, da, da. So I went to the doctor. He said, I don't think that's what it is. You have more going on. And I'm like, well, I got bit by this tick back in May. He's like, well, we'll test you for Lyme disease. And he did all these tests. And he was like a PA. He wasn't an MD or anything. Did all the tests, did the thing. And he's like, your Lyme disease test was negative, and I'm sending you to a rheumatologist. So for the next year and a half, I went to like 10 different doctors and had shots in my feet. And he talked about surgery, and I'm like, absolutely not. And me and my uncle had a lot of the same symptoms, a lot. And so I read up on it and read up on it and read up on it. And I could not deal with it anymore. And I went back to another doctor, and I was just like, look, it cannot be a coincidence that I got bit by a tick and 6 months later, my health falls apart. It cannot be a coincidence. And he's like, well, let's pull up your test results, because all these doctors were in the same clinic. Pulled it up, and he's like, well, your Lyme titers are elevated, but there's nothing we can do about it now because it's gone on for so long. And I cried a lot and was furious. But it took me like another 8 months or so before I started treatment. I had to find a different doctor. You have to do your own research. But so physically, I had no stamina, couldn't do anything. Mentally, I still have times where it's very hard for me. Sometimes I can't even form a sentence. And to find words is very difficult. Let me tell you a stupid story. When I first got back into writing, there was a meetup group in a town that was about an hour and a half from me. And I was like, I'm doing it, by God, I'm going to do it. It's some writers. And I was terrified, and I was just going to do it. And so I had just started Lyme treatment. So my brain was like really foggy and so I was pretty nervous. Well, when I got there, if it wasn't such a small room, I would have got up and left. But it was a small room. The guy's talking. There's like 10 people in there. We're all sitting around this table. And he says, okay, this is what we do. I'm going to give you a genre and a subject, and you're going to write on it for 5 minutes, and then we're going to read it out loud. And I thought I was going to barf all over myself. Really, I was really worked up because, one, I was like, I don't know if I can remember the genre or the subject. He tells me, long enough to write. So I was like, as soon as he said it, I wrote it down so I wouldn't forget. That's how bad my brain was. And I couldn't come up with words. So and this is the first writing I've done in 20 years. I hadn't even finished a book yet. I made it through the day. I did not die. I wrote some stuff that made people laugh, which was good. That was my goal. And then I left there, and I'm like, I am never going back. I am never doing that again. And I missed my exit going home because I was so much anxiety. But it was stuff like that. Like back in 2018, I could have not done this with you. There's no way. And I am still a little nervous doing interviews and stuff because I'm afraid my brain won't work. Mm-hmm. And I think that's something it's just going to be with me forever. It has vastly improved, but on days that I'm like really tired, there are times it doesn't work. I had a day the other day, I couldn't make change for a guy in the beauty shop. And I've been making change since I was 12 years old. Mm-hmm. I worked for my dad. And my husband, he's like, yeah, but you eventually figured it out. I said, no, he had to tell me how much change it gave him. I could not do it. I couldn't even subtract. Like that whole thing was like not in my brain. There was nothing. It was empty. Cobwebs.
It's magic.
So that was like very hard. And so sometimes, yes, it is hard for me to write because I can't find sentences or words. And I don't know if that slows me down. And then just being tired, I don't know if I was having a relapse. I couldn't decide what it was. If I was having a relapse of the Lyme, if I was going through menopause, if it was stress, there's like
myriad of factors,
myriad things.
Yeah. But what I do love and what I take away from that is that, you know, I have known you since 2020, which is already a couple of years, and all of this is stuff that on the surface I wouldn't be aware of had I not known you, had we not sort of spoken in the different things. Like you handle it well when you have taken this kind of adversity and swung it around, and you're producing and you're creating fiction. And I think, you know, there are a lot of people out there who are in much more privileged positions that find a lot of excuses not to do this kind of stuff that they say that they want to do. And I think that you are a prime example of someone who, you know, when the creative, and as I'm about to say, I know it's not sort of well phrased, but as the creative bug bites, you pick it up, you take it, and you carry on, and you're making it happen. And like, not only that, but you are doing it well. I know we sort of had discussions about like your books and things, and they look fantastic. You're clearly following the process and making all the stuff work. And it's as I say, it's a joy to kind of watch your journey from my side.
Thank you. I don't think I might not have ever got back into writing if it hadn't been for the Lyme disease, because that really threw me into, I had got back into reading, and then that inspired me. I'm like, I can do this. I can do this. This is something I can do. And then I'm like, what if I could do this and get off my feet? You know, because I have like 2 co-infections. One of them is called Bartonella, and that is really hard on it, like messes with your capillaries. And so standing on my feet, which breaks your capillaries as you're standing all day, it's like excruciating pain at night. That has improved, but it is not gone. So I think that really threw me back into writing. So that is one good thing that has come from that stupid tick.
Always a silver lining. No superpowers, unfortunately, but at least
no superpower.
We are coming up to time, unfortunately, but the question that I ask everyone before we part is, Renee Gallant, why do you write?
And I tried to think of this ahead of time because I know that this is a question that you ask. Why do I write? I write for me. I write to, it's just something I've always wanted to do. And I'm glad I came back to it. Yeah, I just need to. Yeah.
I'm sure your readers appreciate it.
It's just part of my life.
Yeah. Okay, so where can the listeners find out more about yourself and everything that you're working on? I'm
at www.reneegallant.com, and I am on all social media as the writer Renee, THEWRITERENEE.
I'll put the links for that in the show notes. And also, we didn't get a chance to touch on your watercolor painting, which is for sale, but everyone can find out more about that on your website.
Oh, yeah.
I would say a big thank you, Renee, for joining me on the podcast today. A massive thank you to you, the listeners, for tuning in. And as always, if you're looking to level up your writing and activate your author career, then head on over to activatedauthors.com to find out all about our community, our resources, and everything else that we've got going on. One more time from myself and Renee. See you next week.
Activate your energy.